sip a cup of ambition and yawn and stretch and try to come to life. Jump in the shower and the blood starts pumping. Out on the streets, the traffic starts jumping. And folks like me on the job from 9 to 5. Working 9 to 5. What a way to make a living. Barely getting by. It's all taking and no giving. They just use your mind and they never give you credit. It's enough that drive you crazy if you let it. 9 to 5. For service and devotion, you would think that I would deserve a fast promotion. Want to move ahead, but the boss won't seem to let me. I swear sometimes that man is out to get me. They let you dream just to watch them shatter. You're just a step on the boss man's ladder, but you got dreams he'll never take away.
Welcome back to Office Hours Live at our usual time, but it's great to be here. You're live, and I'm live, and let's hear it for Office Hours Live.
Woohoo! Yay!
Well, that's sort of, I sort of induced that kind of applause, didn't I? But anyway, you can applaud. You can applaud back where you are, wherever you are. And Dolly Parton, you can applaud as well, even though you have not responded to my requests to get involved. Look, today we have a bunch of things we want to cover. One is the meltdown of Trump. A lot of stuff going on there. Another is the progressive movement. Have some announcements and some things to talk about. I want to talk about healthcare a little bit. Take your questions. A lot of good questions this week. Really good questions. I mean, get better than ever. High quality. I would give you maybe out of a 10 a 9.3 this week. Never, right? Huh? And also, we're going to have a report from Zoe Beck on other activities we have to do. A lot of things, and we have to kind of squeeze it into a half hour. So, let me just start. Don't forget to share this because we're live, and if you share, then other people know that we are live and they can participate as well. You can always watch this later. But why am I saying you can watch this later? Because if you are watching now, why would you want to watch later? It's a logical conundrum here. Okay, the Trump meltdown. There he is, the Trump, and you see he is melting down. The poor fellow. And you know, one way you know that there's a Trump meltdown is because of the people he is now bringing in to run his campaign. Roger Ailes, who was just fired from Fox News because of sexual harassment. So Roger Ailes is now working for Donald Trump. Roger Ailes is sort of the attack dog, the pit bull that Richard Nixon used and Ronald Reagan used, and now Donald Trump thinks he's going to use it. Stephen Bannon, you may not know Stephen Bannon. Stephen Bannon ran something called Breitbart News, which is another kind of an attack dog outfit. So what you're going to have is no reset button for Donald Trump. As he's melting, he's going to go out in the style that he knows, which is more and more outrage. I mean, this week he said Obama was the founder of the Islamic State. He also says, Pennsylvanians should monitor the polls in certain districts. Nudge, nudge. He's talking about predominantly black districts. He's talking about really voter intimidation. He's basically losing. Now, let me just say this, because you're going to see more and more, we're going to hear more and more outrage from Donald Trump. The reason is his whole persona, his whole being, his whole reason for being on this earth is to be a winner. That's his whole sales pitch. That is his identity. He is a winner, everybody else is a loser. But now that he's a loser, he is melting down. He is losing. You know what that's going to do to the psychology of a kind of grandiose, narcissistic winner? I mean, the meltdown is going to be even worse. So put your seatbelts on while he melts, this loser. All right. Meanwhile, Hillary Rodham Clinton, basically, you know that she has said repeatedly, now this is her quote, that she is a progressive who likes to get things done. A progressive who likes to get things done. Look, let's take her let's just assume that she is sincere. Let's take her at her word. The problem that she is going to have is that it looks like the House is going to stay Republican. We'll get into that in your questions. And there's not going to be, even if the Democrats take over the Senate, there's not going to be 60 votes to overcome a filibuster. So there's not going to be a lot, it's not going to be very easy to get anything through Congress. It's not going to be much easier than it was with Obama. Secondly, there is going to be no honeymoon. You know, traditionally presidents have a presidential honeymoon, you know, because everybody is so happy and there's so much enthusiasm and excitement when the president comes in and becomes a new president. But not for Hillary, because you see, this is such a nasty campaign and she is so distrusted by so much of the public to begin with. There's probably not going to be much of a presidential honeymoon. And thirdly, perhaps most significantly, the moneyed interests, those big corporations and financial institutions and big moneyed individuals, those moneyed interests are more powerful than they have ever been before. Which means the only way she actually becomes any kind of a progressive, gets anything done, raises taxes on the wealthy, as she said she's going to do, to finance childcare and infrastructure and a lot of other things that she wants to do, the only way she gets to do that is if the progressive movement that you are part of, presumably many of you, if that progressive movement actually puts more and more pressure on Hillary Clinton and on the Democrats. Do you understand the importance of why progressives need to be mobilized? You get that? So I just wanted to bring your attention to this group. This is called BrandNewCongress.org. Brand New Congress. This is organized by a bunch of Bernie Sanders organizers. It is organized essentially BrandNewCongress.org. You can go there today. You can get involved. It's to look at down ballot. Look at Senate contests and House contests and state contests where it is possible for progressives to have a big impact still, and where progressives have got to be organized to take back and make sure that even the Democrats in the Senate and in the House in 2018, after the midterms, and beyond that in 2020, and the president in 2020, are genuine progressives. So write this down, will you please? BrandNewCongress.org. Get involved. And stay tuned, because on this live, on our Facebook Office Hours Live, we're going to be bringing you every week a lot of information about where the progressive movement is and what you can do. People want to know, what can I do? What can I do? Also, before I leave, I've got to tell you about the best argument for a single-payer system occurred a couple of days ago when Aetna, one of the biggest private health insurers, said we are pulling out of most states where we have been in with regard to the Obamacare exchanges under Obamacare, under the Affordable Care Act. We're pulling out because we can't make enough money, because there are too many sick people and not enough healthy people who are signing up. Now listen, this is the problem. This is the problem with it's not just Obamacare. This is a problem with our entire private for-profit health insurance system. It's a system designed to avoid sick people. Can you believe it? I mean, this demonstrates that our entire healthcare system is designed to avoid sick people. You've got these giant, Aetna and United Health and Humana, these are huge, and they're getting larger and larger. They are consolidating. Aetna wants to consolidate with Humana. United Health is also very, very large. It's gigantic, as a matter of fact. They're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So the real choice ahead, as a practical matter, the real choice ahead is either hugely expensive, for-profit, monopolistic healthcare organizations that are for-profit and they are unaffordable by most of us, and certainly unaffordable by people who are very sick, or else we follow the way every sane, reasonable, advanced economy, civilization has gone, and have a single-payer healthcare system. That is the direction. That's the choice, folks. And Aetna reveals that that's the choice. Are you with me? Okay. One final point. Your last week's homework assignment. You remember the homework assignment? Now, this is not just me talking to you. This is interactive. You have homework. at the last work homework assignment was that you would find somewhere, here's you, and here, over here, is a Trump supporter. I'm assuming you're not a Trump supporter. So your homework assignment was to find a Trump supporter and actually talk to that Trump supporter and find out why that Trump supporter is supporting Trump, and see if you can actually develop a little bit of a relationship. I'm not talking about a profound sort of loving relationship. I'm talking about just an acquaintance relationship, because it's important for you and important for all of us to understand what other people are thinking. That's the way you learn. That's the way we all communicate. We used to communicate in this country. So if you could, write in right now. In fact, we are going to be taking your responses. I will read them. What did you find out when you did your homework? What was your experience when you did your homework? When you sought out and Trump supported, when you asked why that supporter is supporting Trump? Okay? All right. Moving on to your questions. And then in the midst of your questions, I'm going to ask Zoe to actually give a report on what we are doing. Brian Christian III, why is Obama pushing the Trans-Pacific Partnership during the lame duck session? Brian, first of all, let's be clear. That Trans-Pacific Partnership is a horrible idea. It is a big global corporate policy developed by big global corporations for big global corporations. It is against the interests of most Americans, because any health, safety, environmental, or labor, or even investor protections become much more difficult to achieve under the Trans-Pacific Partnership. You know that. Now, why is Obama pushing it? I think he's pushing it because this is one promise he made to corporate America. And he feels that he's got to fulfill the promise. Maybe he feels that he's got to fulfill the promise because corporate America cooperated with him on whatever, maybe Dodd-Frank, or maybe on the Affordable Care Act. But it is a bad promise. He's doing it in a lame duck session. That is before his term ends, and after the last, really after the election, so that he doesn't have to inflict this on his successor. Hillary Clinton, as you know, has said she does not support the Trans-Pacific Partnership. You need to write your member of Congress right now, today, and say, do not, absolutely do not vote in favor of the Trans-Pacific Partnership during a lame duck session. Rolando Rabelcava? Did I pronounce that right? No? Please address the decision to end private prisons from the Secretary General, please. Well, it was the decision from the Attorney General, and that decision was based on a report by the Inspector General last week that showed that private prisons really are less safe and less secure than public prisons. Now, we're only talking about 13 federal prisons that are privatized right now, that will go back to being under the Federal Bureau of Prisons. But what it does show, I think, is that we've got to take a very hard look. Most prisons in this country are under state supervision, and the states have been privatizing like mad. We have an entire prison industrial complex, and we've got to get them back under public control, because there's no accountability. I mean, these private prison corporations, all they want to do is make money, and there's no way of knowing how prisoners are actually being treated. I mean, they don't have a voice. We can't get reporters in there. I mean, it's an example of privatization gone berserk, gone amok. Marianne Tashima, I'd like to know why the Republican Party hasn't been able to produce a viable candidate for president. Because there are no viable presidential candidates who are Republicans. Jordan Williams, is making the healthcare, health insurance, and pharmaceutical industries not-for-profit a viable option for fighting the enormous costs associated with those industries? No, because you see, even if they are called not-for-profit, their executives still take gigantic, humongous executive salaries, the biggest ones. That's one of their motivations for getting very, very big, even if they're not-for-profit. The bigger they are, the more their executives can say, well, I'm an executive just like for-profit executives, so I ought to be getting $15 million a year just like they're getting $15 million a year. And all the executives underneath the non-for-profit so-called executive take big executive salaries, and you have the same inefficiencies built into the not-for-profit health insurance sector. Okay, Ann Ross, what do you think will happen with the failures of Trump if Clinton wins? Oh, the hardcore followers of Trump if Clinton wins. Are they galvanized enough to continue a path of bigotry, xenophobia, and social unrest? And, well, it's a very important question, because it's not as if when Donald Trump melts, these people are going away. I mean, he has lighted a fire of bigotry and xenophobia and sort of fierce hatred that the Southern Poverty Law Center, I don't know if you read this report last week, I posted it on this page, showed that even in schools, even children are expressing more bigotry toward Muslims and toward Latinos and toward minorities, toward African Americans. And in other words, what Trump has done is legitimized, and his biggest legacy, even if he melts away, is going to be legitimizing a culture of overt, much more overt bigotry than we had before. It's going to take a lot of work on all our parts to overcome this, to make bigotry not acceptable. Derek Kicker? Okay, if it's basically economic common sense that a thriving middle class would also lead to more prosperity for the rich, why do corporations continue to put their feet in their mouths, on the neck, their feet on the neck of blue-collar workers? Do they think this is a sustainable, or do they plan to make it up? No, Derek, what's happened is you don't have enough companies in America doing what companies used to do. I remember the era in the 1950s, 60s, and early 1970s when most big corporations did view their workers as assets to be developed instead of costs to be cut. And then you had the 1980s come along, and some of the big, the corporate raiders of the 1980s, they changed the entire culture of corporations so that workers became costs to be cut, not assets to be developed. You had people like Neutron Jack over at General Electric, Jack Welch, who was lionized by the corporate press as some wonderful, wonderful corporate leader. Well, what he did, essentially he made money for General Electric by cutting wages, cutting staff, outsourcing jobs abroad, making life, busting unions. I mean, he should not be lionized. He's one of the villains of the story. Why wages have been so stagnant for so many people for so long. And if you have stagnant wages and a shrinking middle class, believe me, it's bad for business, because there's not enough purchasing power in the system to buy all of the stuff that American corporations can produce. 70% of the American economy is consumer spending.